And so eloquently acknowledged, or so attentively heard.
He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the big world in his hands. He's got the wide world in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the wind and rain in his hands. He's got the sun and the moon right in his hands. He's got the wind and the rain in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got that gambling man in his hands. He's got that lying man in his hands. He's got the crap shooting man right in his hands. Whole world in his hands. He's got a baby in his hands. He's got a little bit of baby in his hands. He's got a little bit of baby in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got you and me, brother, in his hands. He's got you and me, sister, in his hands. He's got you and me, brother, in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands. Oh, he's got everybody in his hands. He's got everybody. And he's got everybody here right in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands.
Next stop, Saigon Airport in Vietnam, formerly French Indochina.
Getting to know you, getting to know all about you, getting to like you, getting to love you like me, getting to know you, getting in my way, but nightly. You are precisely my cup of tea. Getting to know you, getting to feel free and easy. When I am with you, getting to know what to say. Heaven to notice that I am right and breathing because of wonder, beautiful and new. Hey, and nothing about you that Welcome to Vietnam, Miss Anderson.
Thank you very much, my dear. Thank you a lot.
From Saigon to Bangkok, capital of Thailand, which translated means land of the free. Almost every school child in Bangkok learns English.
Obey. Obey. Arrow. Arrow. Long. Long. Outlaw. How do you do, Miss Anderson? How do you do?
Mrs. Bonchon and Sims, it is really a very, very great pleasure to meet you and to know that you are studying English and that you are going to be better able to understand us from America. I wonder just how your likes and dislikes coincide with those of the children in America.
The girls may have some questions to ask you.
Fine.
Miss Marian Anderson, what is your favorite song?
I have two favorites. They are both Negro spirituals. Do you know about Negro spirituals? They are songs of my people that are born out of when they were very sad, they have made these songs. Later, their songs were a bit more gay. But this one, tramping, it is called, means walking along slowly and very hard, because you have on your shoulders many unpleasant things. And so the song means when you go to the other land, everything will be beautiful. In this state, Abraham Lincoln, one of the presidents of whom you have learned much, made for the Negroes in America a freedom, we say emancipation. You know the word freedom. And after this freedom, for which they were most grateful, their songs began to be more gay. Why? Because they began to feel that they, your word, belonged. It was Abraham Lincoln with his proclamation. They know the word proclamation?
I think so.
The word proclamation means a paper that is written to say, now we will do the thing in a new way. And this new way was of great benefit to the Negroes in the United States.
I'm tramping, tramping, trying to make a heaven my home. Hallelujah, I'm tramping, tramping, trying to make a heaven my
Thailand used to be called Siam. It's a constitutional monarchy now, but when the king enters, the band plays Sara Sern Pra Barami, and everyone stands. His Majesty sits on a throne in a roped-off section reserved for the royal family. Veteran members of the diplomatic corps say that only several times in history has the King of Thailand broken precedent by rising to greet a distinguished visitor.
Your Majesty. People heard Miss Anderson in a single concert in Hong Kong,
And in Manila, the Philippines Herald called her a brilliant singer and a great woman. There was Schubert's Serenade in Manila, and Schubert's Ave Maria in Taipei, Singapore, and Delhi. And in between concerts and planes, there was always time to pay her country's respect to men like the late Ramon Magsaysay of the Philippines. Vietnam, an infant nation which is known for foreign domination and the ravages of communist civil war, Miss Anderson on a Sunday morning prayed, and with an organ several centuries old, sang, "Let My People Go."
Israel was in Egypt land, let my people go. Oppressed so hard they could not stand, let my people go. Go down, Moses, with on Egypt land, tell old Pharaoh to let my people go.
Miss Anderson is a Christian, but she is as much at home in a Buddhist meditation temple as she is in an Israeli synagogue or a Muslim mosque. This was a conversation in Rangoon with Daumya Sen, a Buddhist scholar.
Have you visited any centers like this before?
No, I have not.
Well, as far as we are concerned, as Buddhists, the Buddha made no distinction at all between whether a person is rich or whether they're poor, or whether belonging to the same caste or that caste. And in one of his sermons, when he was talking about outcasts, he said, you're not born an outcast. Just as the way you're not born a Brahmin high class. He said, it's by your deeds that you become an outcast, or by your deeds that you become a Brahmin.
And whether you call it one faith or another isn't too terribly important. I think if we are striving to do the very best that is in us to do.
Yes, that is how we feel also. After all, it is not outward appearances that is religion or of the mind.
We do a spiritual that's called 12 gates to the city. Hallelujah. And this is one of the songs of my people after his labors here are over, where he will be able to have the things that he hoped for here.
All people can enter the gates. Is really becoming more and more accepted in the world. For instance, which are to be governed by others, are emerging as new nations. This idea that everyone has a right or has it in him to enter the gates, the 12 gates, as you say, to the beautiful.
Yes.
Do you find that sort of...
I do find it for this reason. I think that many people knew within themselves what they felt were right for them. It is probably the fulfillment to them of many of their prayers that we might call them larger nations, or other people have recognized the fact that there are a people who are believers and that they are as important as others. And I think no matter how small you are, how insignificant you may feel, you have yourself a religion or a belief which makes you great. Have you found, too, that the fellow can give his all if he feels that he belongs?
I think this sense of belonging is a feeling that most people want to have. Otherwise you find you're outside a thing and you think you can't achieve what you feel you could because no one will recognize you. You don't belong to anything.
It is very important. It's been my experience on this trip, the little that one has been able to know of the people of the different countries, that they seek, too, to be great.
One does and we do instead of using I.
Possibly because one realizes the longer one lives that there is no particular thing that you can do alone. With the execution of the work that we do, there are many people, those who wrote the music, those who made the pianos on which the accompanist plays, the accompanist who actually lends support to the performance, to go out without any of these things, to stand on your own. Even the voice, even the breath, even the everything, the motion that you have, to go to a platform to perform, it's not of your doing. So the I in it is very small after all.
Troops of communist entertainers have blanketed Asia with their propaganda. During the past year, the tiny Republic of Burma has had art and dance troops from both Russia and China. But all the people of the United States sent Miss Anderson to represent them. And her performance, the evening of October 19th, will long be remembered.
There's no hiding place down there. There's no hiding place down there. Oh, I went to the rock, I had no place. Rock, I had no hiding place. No hiding place down there. Oh, the rock hide, I'm burning too. Oh, the rock hide, I'm burning too. Oh, the rock hide, I'm burning too. I want to go to heaven as well as you. There's no hiding place down there. Oh, the cinnamon, he gambled and fell. Oh, cinnamon, he gambled and fell. Oh, the cinnamon gambled and fell. Now he wanted to go to heaven, but he had to go to... There's no hiding place down there.
Among the backstage admirers was the Prime Minister.
Miss Anderson, your performance tonight is the very rare combination of good voice, good technique, and good dramatic acting. The beauty and charm of your mind are fully expressed in the pair of your dazzling eyes and your childlike lips. I wish you every success. It is a great pleasure to meet you.
Thank you so very much. It's a joy to be here. It's a great
Next time when you come, please come during cold season.
I know I will
Yes.
enjoy it much.
Our warm weather will tire you out very much.
But it wasn't all smiles and compliments. And every American who travels abroad is likely to be reminded of Little Rock.
Miss Anderson, would you like to sing to Governor Forbes in Little Rock?
If it could help at all, I should be very delighted to. If Governor Forbes would be in the frame of mind to accept it for what it is, for what he could get from it, I would be very delighted to do it.
Now, since you are accepted as one of the really faith, have you any thought for promoting more understanding between the people?
It is my honest belief that to contribute you express yourself most easily. There are some people who are speakers. I am not. If I should choose to feel that I can help.
That when Miss Anderson sang the Malayan national anthem, rendition by a visiting artist, and was a mark of respect for the newborn nation.
Listen.
In her book, Miss Anderson speaks of the future and says someday she might like to try something other than the classics and spirituals, perhaps something from Rodgers and Hammerstein. In a Kuala Lumpur school, on the very day that the Malayan flag was being raised in the United Nations, she made her debut with a song from South Pacific.
Good morning, boys. It is a distinct pleasure to be here this morning and to greet you in this close fashion. Absolutely no doubting that some of you here today will have the destiny of this country in your hands. And it is so very important. Things like hate and fear destroy you, restrict you from being the kind of big person that you could be. And I might bring to your attention that hate and fear are two things with which babies are not born. And I have this morning a song which epitomizes this statement.
You got to be taught to hate and fear. You got to be taught from year to year. It's got to be drummed in your ear to year. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be taught to be afraid of people whose eyes are ugly made, and people whose skin is a different shade. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be taught before it's too late, before you are 6 or 7 or 8, to hate all the people your relatives hate. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be taught before it's too late, before you are 6 or 7 or 8, to hate all the people your relatives hate. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be carefully taught.
Miss Anderson concluded her trip in Pakistan and India, toward which a major part of the Soviet cultural program has been directed. General Alfred Gunther, just recently returned from India and concerned about the effects of this Russian propaganda, says we need more Marian Anderson. He said her effect was inspiring and called her our secret weapon. She was a sellout everywhere, and the Indian press called her our fair lady. The big night had to do with some Indian musicians and some Western music. But let Miss Anderson tell you about it.
The music of India is most interesting. This highly developed and cultivated art has resisted all foreign influence and thereby retained its purity and vigor. One wishes there were more time to study it. The main emphasis is on melody and improvisation rather than harmony, as in our Western music. The basic form is raga, which is based on various combinations of the 7 notes, each divided into its sharp and flat. Half tones and quarter tones are common. 6 months ago, one did not dream that we would be singing with 60 Indian musicians. But last July, we received a communication through the Anta people that there was a newly formed Westray and that they would like to accompany us if we could send them one of our scores for them to work on. We were delighted, and several pounds of Western music went eastward by mail. When we arrived in Bombay on the 12th of November, and we were expected. As far as we know, this is the only symphony orchestra between Tokyo and Tel Aviv. And it is one that we will remember with much less. The conductor, Mr. De Silva, is a lawyer from Goa. And the string section is made up of clerks, civil servants, and housewives, teachers, and 4 doctors. The percussionist is an able-bodied seaman and a most handsome Sikh. The entire woodwind and brass sections come from the Indian Navy, augmented by several policemen. There was no harp or English horn because these instruments simply do not exist in India, where all Western instruments are difficult to come by. We rehearsed part of one night and much of the next day with the orchestra and gave the concert that same evening. It is now my very great honor to present to my fellow Americans the Bombay City Orchestra in Mon Coeur from Samson and Delilah by Sanson.
Oh,
There were news conferences and interviews everywhere. And because Miss Anderson was a special sort of an American, the questions asked were of a special kind of interest to Asians. They ranged all the way from atom bombs to baseball, to the Lincoln Memorial Incident of 1939. Miss Anderson was once barred from singing in Washington's Constitution Hall, and the United States government then made the Lincoln Memorial available for her concert. This conversation was at the All India radio station in New Delhi, and the interviewer is Mrs. Tara Ali Beg, author and commentator.
In reading your autobiography, I was very struck by many things that have happened in your career, and of course the very celebrated one, the episode at the Lincoln Memorial. You have been a trailblazer in many things, and you undoubtedly did act as a symbol on that occasion. Is that correct?
Well, I suppose I'm not a symbol on that particular occasion. But, you know, one talked very little about the affair in Washington that happened at that particular time, because some of the people involved were not perhaps quite well acquainted with conditions, with a particular thing. There are some times that we are so interested in what we think and how we feel. We take upon ourselves the thing of answering for other people, the responsibility for other people, without having first thought out the thing, without being well enough acquainted with it, only to find a little later on that these things were absolutely not necessary to have been done. I had no bitterness, and I have no bitterness now, because we look for bigger things. And if you're all right on the inside, you don't have to worry about things like that. They will eventually take care of themselves, and whatever unfortunate thing comes, it might halt it for a little while. But there is a divine pattern, and there is no one person who can stop it.
I can understand your having no bitterness. I think that what we're always up against in this world is the prejudices of the small people. It's hard for me, personally, to think in terms of the reasons why those prejudices existed, because for me to think in terms of being different, because they are brown or what color of their skin is, seems so irrelevant. Yes. But there is also the prejudices do remain. We know they are isolated to certain areas and sectors, and that is why, again, I asked you the question earlier, what you meant by my people. I had the impression that you were speaking then of the colored people.
Next of my people, you think first of the colored people in the United States. Now, I might say this. All of the Negroes in the United States are not relegated to a particular area. Not at all. There are some who own their own homes, many of them, and they are things of beauty to behold. There are some who have gone into neighborhoods that have been a little bit run down, and they have done excellent things with those neighborhoods, and it is a joy to go in and look. There are areas where my people are naturally in the very unpleasant places. There are those with whom or about whom we are very concerned, because it is so true that no matter how big a nation is, it is no stronger than its weakest people. And as long as you keep a person down, some part of you has to be down there to hold him down. So it means you cannot soar as you might otherwise. Therefore, regardless of how small the Negro may be in whatever area, the whole of our nation is dependent on what is done for the little fellow, dependent sometimes on his very life. The fact that we were able to come over for the State Department and the words honor and the opportunity gives us, as there certainly must be in the hearts of many Negroes who may not see the light of day, so to speak, an opportunity to speak for the only land that we know. If we were not in America, many of us might still be in Africa. Some of us might be happier, some of us wouldn't be. I know nothing of Africa. I haven't been there. So my land and my country and my allegiance is with America.
That leads me to a very fundamental question. I think that in everybody's life, they have difficulties and crossroads. And there is a basic faith that they come back to. I'd like you to tell me, if you can, what would be that basic faith that you come back to?
And when we speak of words, I would like to say to you that I have a most wonderful mother. And her philosophy has been that on which my sisters and I have tried to build our lives. Mother is a believer, and the 3 of her children are also believers. It is so necessary in anything that we do not to feel too complete, because you're obliged to come, regardless whether you would like it or not, to your extremity. You cannot leave this world at that point. You've got to see whatever it is through to the end. And although there are many people who seek this help only in extremity, it is nice to be acquainted with it through your whole life. And that is what my mother has taught us. It gives you a peace of mind. It gives you an understanding of your fellow men, even though in some instances they behave so poorly. And you know that if the Supreme Being were not a just one, the world should long ago have come to an end. And therefore, when things happen along the way, which might pull one up rather sharply through disappointment, you think on your faith, and you go back, so to speak, to the well to be replenished.
Does it sum it up to say, to see it through to the end?
Yes. And you know, there is a Negro spiritual called, I open my mouth to the Lord and I never will turn back. I will go, I shall go, see what then will be. And it sums up so much of what so many people need to feel who don't find all of these wonderful things around. I will go and I shall go to see what the end will be. Why? Because I believe in what I find at the end.
A French poet once wrote, "If you wish to influence the Indians, rather than 1,000 missionaries, send one saint." The United States sent Miss Anderson, and one morning she led a throng of several thousand Indians to the beautifully simple shrine of their great saint, Mahatma Gandhi. The mayor of Old Delhi introduced the lady from Philadelphia.
Which led her at the age of 8 to scrub neighbors' doorsteps to save up the money to buy a violin. She is known and honored in every quarter of the globe. Ladies and gentlemen, we are fortunate in having this talented lady of world renown amidst us this morning. Her approach to music is essentially spiritual. She gives powerful expression to the hopes and dreams of the poor Negro community and their wishes for the next world. The language of music is universal. In our country, most of our music has a spiritual basis, and for that reason, our people feel especially attracted by Miss Anderson's uplifting message.
No American official or visiting dignitary from any foreign nation has ever before been invited to speak at the Gandhi Memorial.
President Agrawala, the Ambassador of the United States, and ladies and gentlemen, first of all, let me say to you, please, coming here this morning was in the beginning to be a very private affair. Knowing something of the life and the aspirations of Mahatma Gandhi, as a Negro, I was naturally very deeply moved and felt it absolutely imperative to come to this spot before returning to my own country. The teachings of Gandhi have meant so much to so many of you whose lives are naturally better because of him. His life, as you know, is as a beacon which shines ever bright to those who need it most. In coming this morning, it was our intention to do, or try to do, that song which we have been told was a favorite of Mahatma Gandhi, and one which we sing very often in our churches. I would like very much to do Lead Kindly Light, but if you please, just now, I would wish we might all bow our heads for a half a minute to the memory of your saint.
Time now for a commercial by International Telephone and Telegraph Corporation. There isn't going to be any. The IT&T people feel that their accomplishments in communications and electronics can never be substituted for the beauty and wisdom of human communications. And that Miss Anderson's achievement in Asia is something with which they would like to be identified. So would we. Good night and good luck.
The International Telephone and Telegraph Corporation and CBS Television are pleased to announce that the State Department and the USIA have arranged for 100 prints of tonight's distributed throughout Asia and other parts of the world. Miss Anderson's trip is part of a continuing program of ANTA and the State Department, which has sent more than 100 such artists to distant lands.